Have you noticed that tipping culture has gotten absolutely ridiculous in America?
Most consumers have no idea that every time you tip in a restaurant in most states, it cuts against the worker's wage.
From tipping fatigue. Americans are suffering from so-called tipflation.
It has gotten a little crazy. I was recently asked by a computer for a tip where there were no people involved in the transaction.
Today, almost every place you buy something, they flip that stupid iPad payment thing around and want you to tip 15, 20, 25% just for doing their job. And they look so butthurt when you don't tip. You just punch in my order for coffee and you want me to tip you 25% for a 10-second interaction? And then there's a bunch of apps that want you to tip before the service even happens, like Uber Eats, right? Which, you know, is kind of weird, isn't it? What do you think?
I need food. Can't swim while I'm eating. The 30-minute rule. Genius.
On the other hand, people argue that tipping before you even get your service can actually help you get better service.
G&T with Lime?
We're not open until noon. It's 11:57.
Got it. Now what time is it?
Either way you look at it, this is one of the most divisive and popular topics on the internet because it's like out of control and people are arguing on the internet. They're outraged because of the out of control tipping expectations in America. Look, we're gonna cover a lot of ground in this video. It's gonna be fun, it's gonna be exciting, and at the end of this video, I'm gonna tell you about a $20 million painting that, believe it or not, has everything to do with what we're seeing in tipping culture in America. Now, first, let's take a brief look at the history of tipping. You know, believe it or not, tipping was actually not started here in America. It was started in Europe, which is kind of funny. It's ironic because they don't really tip now, but originally that's where it came from. And from the year 500 to around the 1500s, wealthy people would give, you know, lower class people extra money for their services. And in the 1800s, some Americans were traveling around Europe and they caught sight of the tipping customs and they thought, hey, this is pretty neat. We should bring it home and do what the Europeans are doing. And that's kind of cool. And that's how tipping found its way to the US. But not everyone was on board, and quite a few folks thought it was a practice that we could do without. You know, Americans continued to have mixed feelings even back then about tipping at all. You know, some people say, you know, it's condescending, it was classist, you know, it's almost this elitist way of being like, here's an extra $1, you peasant, or something. And believe it or not, a few states even outlawed the practice around the turn of the 20th century. Isn't that insane? However, it did eventually catch on. So if you fast forward to the end of the Civil War, you know, America's workforce was booming. There's newly freed slaves, there was immigrants still pouring into the country, a lot of people looking for a fresh start, and this is where things seem to kind of take a turn. You know, a lot of employers and business owners, they saw an opportunity because there's this giant pool of workers who were eager to do something but didn't have a lot of options. And they started offering jobs that paid peanuts, you know, really, really low, and they kind of have a nudge to the customers to tip as a way to kind of top off these workers' earnings. And essentially this meant businesses could lower their costs by shifting the wage burden onto customers. And the service industry, seeing this as a good thing, well, at least for the employers, they hopped on the tipping bandwagon in a big way. So who's to blame for this whole controversy? Or should we blame anybody? Is there anything even wrong? Well, here's another one.
What's your take?
If I have to go up to order, I'm not tipping. You know, restaurants are all self-serve. They're all self-serve now.
0%.
Zero. At this point, I work there.
You're doing the work. You should get tipped.
They have the nerve on the iPad to do 15% tip. Chas v'sholom, 20% tip. Pay your people and leave us alone already. Bring back the $2 tip.
100% agree. I'm in.
She made a lot of really good points. Like, for example, if there's no actual service, you're punching in your own order yourself like they do at Panera now and a lot of other restaurants. It doesn't even make sense to pay a tip in the first place. She's arguing she should get paid because now she works there. She should get wages for being an employee to prepare her own order or something, right? And then, you know, I think the entitlement, which we're going to talk about in just a few minutes in this video, is a big part of the reason people are so filled with vitriol on both sides. You know, the service worker person hates the customer and the customer hates the service worker person, and it's all because of tips. Or is it? I think there's more to this. We're gonna dig into it in a little bit. You know, things today seem a little bit out of control, right? And, you know, from what I can tell on the internet, most people are kind of over it. If your barista gives you a coffee and they want a $3 or $5 tip, it feels dirty almost to do it.
Some airports, bakeries, coffee shops, and even now some stadiums have introduced a self-service tipping option. It's so you and I can leave tips on average 20% despite not seeing a damn person who is actually helping us. They have gone too far.
You know, for me, when I go to a place, a lot of the workers turn it over in shame. They're like, yeah, it's just going to ask you a few questions, and they almost feel shameful. But then there's other workers that turn it around and almost have like a which is like completely unacceptable in my opinion. But let's talk about owners. Is it really business owners, the evil business owners? Are they to blame? You know, I don't know. I mean, from my perspective, I think it's an entitlement culture problem, at least right now. Check this out.
Oh, thank you. Oh, you're so sweet.
Just gonna ask you a quick question.
Hi.
Hello.
Come here, Max. Next. Yep.
There you go.
Thank you.
I just want to say, it's a nice house for a $5 tip.
You're welcome.
Damn, you only gotta take one more delivery.
I don't want to work here anymore! 5 minutes! 5 minutes out there in the rain! And no tip! No tip!
It's 40 minutes. It's 12 and a half miles. So I don't think you realize how far it is.
So I think you have to pick up if you think it's that far.
They don't let us know how far, so I think you need to adjust your tip to make it right.
How much the tip?
You gave an $8 tip.
What the hell are you looking for? I gave an $8.
Okay, I'm gonna bring the food back. I'm gonna bring the food back. Okay.
No.
Yeah.
So you have a car? So you pay us.
Well,
Just so you know.
for the convenience. So.
Yeah, I know.
Thank you.
But
You have a good day. Take care.
Come get it, next time.
Wow, that was some outrage, if I do say so. You know, it's funny. I laughed a couple times at it. Part of me feels the compassion, but you know, these people are so confused. So is it wrong to pay people really low wages and have them rely on tips? Well, the reason that I say absolutely not is because we live in a free market. These people are employees. They're not slaves. They can leave. They can go do something else. So, you know, if you don't like the fact that, you know, the service you're getting, they're demanding lots of tips from you and they have an attitude, don't go there, right? Business owners, you know, not all of them pay small wages and push tips. Some of them pay high wages, and the market has a way of regulating itself. And when I look at the category of like socialism, for example, this whole idea that, you know, the government is your daddy and it can take money from here and give it over here, it kind of like feels like that a little bit when I look at some of these videos of these mad employees throwing the Uber Eats and demanding more than an $8 tip like we saw in the video earlier. You know, to me, it's an entitlement culture problem, and then it compounds on itself. It compounds because that person who gave an $8 tip in good faith, who thought it was fine, is now going to have a chip on their shoulder and be even more stingy potentially with future tips. You know, let me ask you a question. If the government took Timmy's money and they gave it to Billy, okay? So Timmy has money, government takes it, gives it to Billy. Is that an act of generosity? Is that what it is? Well, the answer is no, it's theft, right? So I don't believe in compulsing people to give, right? The whole point of generosity is that it's from your own free volition. And if you choose, and this is a key point, if you choose to work in the service industry, if you choose to be a server and you get mad if you don't get enough tips, and you think that the problem is that these people are stingy, you've missed the whole point in the first place. Because first of all, none of us really deserve anything. We should be paid for the value that we provide. And if you're at a job where they're not paying you enough money, get a different job. Increase your skill sets, increase your mindsets, increase your network, level up. Don't blame everybody else. So most of me feels kind of like that. You know, I also think that when people get tips, even though they've added no real extra value, it incentivizes poor work performance because it's an entitlement. They think that they just deserve it, that they're owed it. Well, owed it for what exactly? For punching in the order and for handing the cup to you? I don't know. I mean, the way a free market works is the customer decides if you added extra value or not. And that's what a tip is for. It's to cover the spread between their expectation and what you actually delivered. You know, I think it also incentivizes people to not have any pride in their work, because you can provide horrible service and still get 15 and 20% tips all day. It's just weird. I wonder if our grandparents would be actually ashamed to get tips tips like a lot of young people do today. Can you imagine your grandma or grandpa or your great-grandma and great-grandpa flipping around a thing and getting a tip for adding no value? Part of me feels like they would be embarrassed to even get a money for doing nothing. There's another camp of people that just blame society. They blame you. They say that you're not generous, you have no compassion, right? And that you're just a jaded, disconnected person. I think there's truth to that too. The internet has made us all closer than ever before and more distant than ever before at the same time. I can send a message to grandma in a moment, but I'm not actually connected to the people around me. Or you see pictures of families sitting in a living room 5 feet away from each other, but they're in totally different universes on their devices. And this internet social media thing, it has real world implications. You know, we don't look at people as people. We look at them as NPCs in the video game of life. We don't have compassion. We're less generous. I also think a lot of people have unrealistic expectations. You know, how much extra value could a barista even add? You know, if she smiles and she's prompt and she's nice and she hands you the coffee, is that enough to get a tip? What do you want her to give you, a back massage and feed you grapes like you're an Egyptian prince? You know, there's so much complexity in this. And I think the lack in generosity as a culture is real. People are not generous. They're not generous in the way they forgive each other. They're not generous in the way they listen to each other. They're not generous in the way that they serve each other. And they're certainly not as generous as they used to be in the way they tip each other. And what does this do? It creates discouragement. So imagine you're a worker, you're the barista, as my ongoing example, and you're really trying to crush it. You're doing a good job. You show up a little bit early, you work hard, you smile, you deal with the crazy customers. You're doing the job better than most baristas do. And over time, you're going to get discouraged by the lack of generosity. And what happens is your performance gradually takes a beating, right? You get beat up mentally. You'll start to have resentment towards the public and towards customers, right? You'll start to feel entitled, even if you didn't start out that way. And, you know, there's just a general lack of respect in the public square. And this is really what's building up to my main point, and I think can add a lot of value to you. And that is to answer this single question that I have for you. And I'd love if you answered it in the comments because I'm genuinely curious. But here's the question: what is value? You know, theoretically, a tip should be a dollar amount that's representative of this thing called value that was created. You know, the business owner's job is to pay the person for their base labor to do whatever is being done. But if that person exceeds the base expectation, the customer has the opportunity, based on free choice, if they want to reward that extra value that's created. But the word value is a weird word. What does it even mean? Is it really a thing? You see, value is actually really, really subjective. I'll give you an example that makes my point perfectly. I was hanging out with a friend of mine named Brandon. Brandon and I were having a friendly debate in my house about a painting that sold for $20.6 million at Christie's years ago. And what's crazy about this painting, we'll put it on the screen for you, is that it's just a white painting, meaning on a white canvas, someone painted white paint and someone paid $20 million for this thing. Now, for me, I have a tendency to be more of a logic brain. Brandon has more of an artistic side in a lot of ways than I do. And he said, well, Josh, you know, it's about the emotion. It's about what it makes you feel. You know, the value is in the eye of the beholder. Now, he's correct, but I could not get over the fact of how insane it was to me that this thing was actually worth $20 million. I was just rejecting the notion altogether because it seems ridiculous. And we were like having this heated but friendly discussion about this for like an hour because at the end of the day, value truly is subjective. He wasn't wrong. I wasn't wrong. You know, the painting was worth nothing to me and it was worth $20 million to somebody that I think is a little crazy, but they're allowed to be crazy and they're allowed to pay $20 million for whatever they want. And so because value is subjective, I think that's the root of the entire problem. You know, one of my favorite quotes is that all conflict is the result of unmet expectations. And if you look at all the videos we watched and some of the things you see on the internet, that's really what's happening. This person thinks that they deserve this, they get this, and it causes conflict, internal conflict that manifests as external conflict sometimes. Or on the customer side, they expect this level of a smile with this level of a greeting and this level of promptness, and they get this, and there's this disconnect in the expectations I have about value. The next thing I want to just touch on is the topic of generosity as a category. You know, generosity has all kinds of weird benefits that aren't obvious unless you think about it for a second. You know, I think it's really, really hard to hurt yourself by being generous. It's really, really hard to actually negatively affect yourself by being generous. You know, because what comes around goes around. And people that are generous have a tendency to be abundance thinkers. They have a growth mindset instead of a fixed mindset. Now, there's exceptions to the rule, but the point is very simple, is that when you open your hand in generosity, more things can come into your hand. And if you get jaded and polluted by this world and all the negativity, and you say, boo-hoo, I should have got $12 instead of $8, all you're actually doing in the long run is hurting yourself. And if you begin to be generous, even if someone didn't all the way deserve it, you're going to be benefited for that. Let's say that you give the 25% tip to the barista and she had an attitude and she flipped the thing around. You know, did you really even hurt yourself by giving a tip that she didn't deserve? I would argue no, you didn't, because generosity is a way of thinking. It's a way of living. It's a way of viewing the world, that there's more than enough for everyone to have more than enough, that this isn't the last $3 you're ever going to see in your life. And when you love on people, can you imagine if 100 million people in this country just started being more generous on a regular basis? What would it actually do? What would happen to the level of service? Well, it would go up. People would have pride in their work. They would show up. They would feel like they created real value. They would feel like they have real value. So at the end of the day, I'm just one man on the internet. My opinion is that your level of generosity says more about you than it does about the service that you receive. You know, the Bible says that the measure which you use will be used against you. And if that doesn't keep you up at night and freak you out, it should. Maybe you should watch that again. The measure that you use will be used against you, right? The level of generosity that you give to people will come back to you, my friend. The expectations, the standards that you hold other people to is the same standard you are going to be held to with God, which I think is kind of awesome and a little bit sobering, right? So to end this video out, I'm going to play you a clip that has to do with that $20 million white painting argument. Now, I made this as a joke. It was never intended to be released to the public, but it just fit so perfectly in this video, I decided to include it. So this is a secret shout out to my friend Brandon Vaughn about the white painting argument. I actually spent some time and bought a white canvas and I painted it with all white paint. I mailed it to him. It's in his house right now. It's an inside joke between the two of us. And just to mock his point of view in love, because we're friends, I made this ridiculous video making fun of silly white paintings that sell for $20 million. Some have said that life is pain, and they are absolutely correct. My only hope to release the suffering inside is to expel it onto the canvas. Is my work worth millions? No. It's worth infinity of the monies. In the depths of the sadness, there's only one thing. White paint. White lies. White noise. White privilege. In this place, I forget the girls who rejected me, the credit card companies that declined me, the employers who fired me. But who's laughing now? It's time to let go. It's time to be free. It's time to be bold. It's time to be me. The time has finally come to show my true colors. White. Bright white. For publicity and media opportunities, please contact artist@gmail.com. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you got value out of this, and I hope it challenged you to think a little bit different. Generosity is about you, not about them. At least that's what I think. What do you think? Hey, and don't forget, like, subscribe, share, do all the things. It actually matters. It actually helps us. We're just people like you. Can you be generous and subscribe and like?